I applied to Lincoln from prison, and they accepted me while I was in prison. I sent my acceptance letter that I received in prison to my sentencing judge, and he amended my sentence. And I remember I'm in the courtroom with him, older white man, Judge Thurman Norman Barron, and he says to me, "Listen, I'm going to give you another chance."
Today, I have such an inspiring story to share with each of you. Every once in a while, we all find ourselves in a moment where life feels heavy. When the plan falls apart, when it's hard to see a way forward. But then, one person decides to go against the tide, to stop waiting on the system to fix itself. And when that works, it reminds the rest of us what's possible. Today, I have one of those stories. David Heiber has lived through the kind of struggle most people don't come back from. But he didn't just come back, he built something great. From prison to a doctorate, from being pushed out of school to helping over 70,000 students find their way back in. This is a conversation about resilience, purpose, and the power of showing up. How we all can find our way back. And what needs to change in education, especially for students who've learned not to trust it. This is what I want to know. David Heiber, welcome to What I Want to Know. I'm glad to have you on the show.
No, good brother, you are a legend, a living legend in this space. You are a trailblazer. I have followed you. You've been supportive my whole endeavor as an educator and an entrepreneur. So thank you so much, man. Like I remember our first meeting in your office in Washington D.C. when Dr. Statham introduced us.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of you. In the intro, I talked about your journey. You've talked about it a lot. But for a lot of people out there, it is important to know what is possible when you have stumbles. So I do want to, I want to talk about the book. I want to talk about Concentric and your company. But the starting point has to be how you faced these challenges that led to your incarceration, and then the rebound, which is one heck of a rebound. Now, as I understand it, as I was doing research on you, I didn't know you were a track star in high school.
Yeah, man. So in Wilmington, Delaware, I was all state. My favorite sport was baseball, but we were stacked. A lot of people I was behind got drafted, like Dwight Maness, Cliff Brumball. We were stacked. So one of my best friends at the time decided, he wanted to go out for cross country. So, baseball was in the spring back then, and it wasn't all year round. So my best friend, shout out a long time ago at that time, Jeff McLaughlin, said, "I'm going to run cross country." And he's the one that introduced me to baseball years ago when I was like 8 or 9. And I went out and I was one of the best in the state as a freshman. And I really enjoyed cross country. And I kind of progressed from cross country and track.
Wow. Well, what went wrong? What threw things off? Because you were a great high school athlete, and then you faced challenges that really sort of sent you in a spiral. You pulled out of it, but it happens to so many young men.
Yeah, so a lot of times we think that it's these that we're these anomalies, but no, many young men, particularly African Americans, we have challenges, right? And then we think that people are linear. We think that if you do A, you should get B, then you get C, and then maybe D. And life is not like that. Life is so very complex. And so, quite frankly, what happened to me is I was raised by my white grandparents. I didn't know my biological mom was alcoholic. I didn't know my biological father. So when I said my parents died, it was my grandparents, my white grandparents, that passed away. And so this is my senior year in high school. I'm at lunch, one of the 3 lunches, because I decided, because I was supposed to be that guy, that I could go to all the lunches I wanted to, that my grandfather, who was Christmas shopping, had a heart attack. and he died. And he died at the gas station on the corner of my high school.
Let me jump in for a quick moment. For a lot of students, the traditional model just isn't the right fit. That's why more than 3 million families have chosen K-12 powered schools offering flexible, tuition-free learning options with certified teachers and a personalized approach that meets learners where they are. If that sounds worth exploring, you can head to k12.com/podcast. All right, back to the conversation.
And, the backstory behind all that is my father had given me a car, and I used to leave school, and if I didn't go to 3 lunches, I would leave school to go get something to eat. And I would there's only a couple ways to get to the different restaurants, of Wendy's, McDonald's, whatever the case may be. So my grandfather, died at 11:11 a.m. is when he had a heart attack. That is when I would have been leaving school, driving past that gas station. And so I remember I had a 1983 Ford Escort. So now I'm really dating myself, back in the 80s, little Ford Escort. But I decided to stay in school. But he had a heart attack Christmas shopping. And my grandfather was an over-the-road truck driver, didn't save a whole lot of money. And so me and my grandmother, we were left kind of destitute. And kind of condensing the story, about 6 weeks later, my grandmother was diagnosed with a brain tumor and lung cancer. And so I had these 2 traumatic instances within a short period of time, and I didn't have the support. And now this is me, or older me, looking back, that I was supposed to be this track star, and I don't remember one social worker, hell, one teacher, one administrator talking to me about the grief I just had. I went to school the next day after the heart attack. The only thing that saved me was Mr. Brad Lane, my gym teacher, my physical education teacher. He let me stay in the gym all day and play ping pong. That was the only adult. And all those other administrators and whatever the case may be, not one came to check on me. And so I spiraled out of control. My grandmother went through the chemotherapy, and I started doing a lot of negative criminal behavior.
One thing led to another, and you ended up, being incarcerated for a couple years, and so you didn't graduate, and you ended up what turned it around? You ended up getting your GED and got admitted to the prestigious Lincoln University. But what turned it around when you were incarcerated?
Well, I mean, this is going to sound like esoteric and stereotypical and whatever the case. It had little to do with me. And we joked at the beginning before we came on that, God takes care of babies, fools, and noobs. And I wasn't a noob at the time, but it was God. It's by the grace of God. It is by the grace of God. My grandmother died when I was in prison, and I couldn't go to her funeral because I was incarcerated, obviously. And there was a lot of older brothers in prison. I was young, very young, 18, and they really supported me. I mean, I think it's really binary in prison. You either come out a better criminal, or you do something with it. And through that experience, every time I wanted to get into something, because everything that you want to get into in the streets, you can get to in prison. It's just different. And every time I wanted to get into something, an older brother would be there and be like, no, why don't you come do this? Why don't you come do this? And I think three salient things that really impacted me, because I was around old heads. And I look back now, I'm an old head, right? So about to be 50. So I see it now, is I always wanted to be around old heads, because old heads, there's so much wisdom and experience, and they've seen so much. And so they introduced me to Bible college, which gave me some type of spiritual backing, even though I was terrible when I came out of college. Came out of prison and went to college. Toastmasters, which is probably one of the most valuable skills I ever had. They had Toastmasters in prison, and it taught me the basis to articulate my thoughts. Right? And then the third thing would be Alternatives to Violence, AVP. So AVP is a program about nonviolence that started in the 70s with the Quakers. And the Quakers believe that there's good in everything and God in everyone and everything. But AVP introduced me to some outside community sponsors that wrote to the judge on my behalf to let me out of prison. And so, and this is how the universe works I was actually in church yesterday, Kevin, and the pastor said, "Does God have a history with you of coming through?" And for me, yes. And so, how can I ever doubt Him? So, as I'm going through this process, our frat brother, my line brother now, who I was 2 years older than, would write me, and he would said, obviously I didn't graduate. I had to get my GED in prison, and he said, "I'm going to Lincoln University." And I was like, wow. But Lincoln was D3. They were a national powerhouse in running, but I was recruited D1. And I remember I had just got my high school diploma, and so I applied to Lincoln from prison. I sent my application from prison, and they accepted me while I was in prison. And, this is when Lincoln was trying to get enrollment up, whatever the case may be. And I got my acceptance letter. I sent my acceptance letter that I received in prison to my sentencing judge, and he amended my sentence. And I remember I'm in the courtroom with him, older white man, Judge Thurman Norman Barron, and he says to me, "Listen, I'm going to give you another chance." And he never did. 18 years on Superior Court bench, he never changed someone's sentence. And he said, "I'm going to give you a chance, but I'm not going to give you too much time. I'm going to let you out of prison August 9th. And so just on Saturday, I celebrated 29 years of walking out of prison. And I walked out of prison onto Lincoln's campus 9 days. I walked out on August 9th, went to Lincoln for freshman week, August 18th, with $50 in my pocket. And Lincoln changed my life. They converted an old mail room into into a room. And I mean, kind of the rest is history. Like Lincoln changed me.
Let me ask you this, because again, your journey is instructive for everyone to know not necessarily just what's possible, but the power of resilience. And at some point in time, I remember we met many years ago, you latched onto this idea of being an educational entrepreneur because you felt the system really wasn't helping kids like you were, and you also saw that there was so much talent and potential in prison, guys who fell off by the wayside because they didn't get a chance. So when you decided you wanted to pursue an educational career, how did you link the education with the entrepreneur mission?
So, it goes back again. Like, I think everything happens for the good of God. And, it's not that I'm this overzealous about being, a Christian and religious, but when you just start seeing the linkage of life. So, no, I wanted to be an attorney. That was my goal, to be an attorney. And I sat down with Dr. Wachukwu, our department head at Lincoln. I was a triple major, history, black studies, and education. And I said, I got accepted to Temple Law School and grad school. And he said, "Well, Dave, you have a felony. You might not be able to practice law." And so I said, okay, I'll go to Temple for African American Studies. So the reason I'm bringing this in is because now we're talking about Afrocentricity with Molefe Asante. So if you take Afrocentricity and concentricity, or Afrocentric and concentric, now you start seeing the interconnectedness of it. So I said, okay, I'll be a teacher. So I did my student teaching, was student teacher of the year, and got hired in Hartford County, Maryland, for the viewers, to give y'all some proximity. But I didn't tell them about my crime. So they hired me because they wanted more young black teachers, particularly males. And I got the job, but I didn't tell them about my record. So I walked out, and they were like, "You better get your fingerprints." I said, "Damn." Let me tell you, let me come back and tell you something. So I went back and told them, and they were like, "Don't call us, we'll call you." And I was like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do? So during college, I had been writing my judge and sending him my transcripts, but he never responded. So finally, I graduate. I called Judge Barron's chambers, and Pam, his secretary, would answer. And I said, "I just don't know what to do. I can't get a job. I have a degree. I can't get a job." And she said, "Okay, hold on." She comes back and says, "Judge Barron wants to see you." So I drive to Delaware. I go to see Judge Barron. And it's the first time I saw him since he sentenced me, and then since he let me out. And he said, "I believe in you. We'll get you a job." At the same time, Baltimore City Public Schools was hiring for teachers. The recruiter was our frat brother that I didn't know. And he said, do you have a kid charge, like a sexual charge? I said, no. Do you have a gun charge? No. Do you have a drug charge? No. You're hired. Let's go. So I got the job teaching. I taught 1 year, became an administrator the very next year. But the system is a system, Kev. Systems are not failing. I was just on a show earlier today, right? And we know systems aren't failing. Systems are getting the results that they're designed to get. And it's to keep a permanent underclass, to keep subservient to the hierarchy. And so I was seeing that. And then I was blessed to meet through Dr. Freeman Rabowski, amazing mentor, man. I mean, he pledged the wrong frat. Shout out to my alphas, but man, he pledged the wrong frat. But he introduced me to Kim Statham. And Kim was doing some innovative work with New School Venture Fund. And I had left the system and became director of student support services. And student support services back then, and you know this, Kev, was everything touchy-feely that was not academic, but it was important. And she said, I love the idea that you have. Have you thought about going on your own? That's when I took my background as an educator and intuitively my background as an entrepreneur. So growing up, and I know you got me only by like 1 year, good brother, but I know you're only 51. But when I was growing up, you had to hustle. So I had paper routes. I was cutting grass. The people who were more my paper route, I was cutting their grass and shoveling their snow. So I've always been an educator. I mean, I always been an entrepreneur. So I just merged the two and said, how can I work with a system but not for a system? Because the system will try to crush you.
Well, let me ask you this, because you're right about that, real quick, because I want to talk about Concentric and the vision. Right now, you're in over 20 states. You've gotten funding from New Schools Venture Fund, over 70,000 students, and you do a lot of the things that combine, as you call, the touchy-feely with the academics. But talk about how Concentric, and then we're going to get into your book, but talk about how Concentric sort of massages or pushes the system to be more responsive. Because as you have said, the system itself is almost designed to punish those that are a little different. And how are you able to, through your work with school districts, sort of flip the script on that reality?
So we've been unapologetically, whether students call it keep it at 100, real, what we call it is being authentic and transparent. We're very authentic and transparent. Here's the fact of the matter is, companies are making millions, if not billions, of black, brown, and poor white children. That's the fact. Most of the people who talk about the work haven't even done the damn work. Like, so for example, people are talking about chronic absenteeism now. There's organizations out there talking about systems and structures. They ain't never walked in near neighborhood that most of that they're talking about. They haven't done that, right? So what Concentric is, it's a theory of change. Concentric is the company name for my theory of change. My theory of change is concentricity. So I'm plugging the second book right now. The second book that is going to be called Concentricity. The first book is academic book, and the second book is more practical, easier digestible. But concentricity is really my version of Afrocentricity. So when I went to Temple and I studied under Molefe Asante created Afrocentricity. Afrocentricity, simply put, is putting Africans and Africans of the diaspora at the center of social phenomena. How can we be subjects and not objects? So concentricity is putting students at the center of schools. It would sound simple and it sounds common sense, but we don't put students at the center of schools. What we do is we put adults in all this bureaucracy. So what we've done is said, okay, what is our approach? The approach is one door at a time. The reason it's one door at a time is because every single human is individual. What works for one doesn't work for works for somebody else. So our approach is one door at a time. So what I did was I took our guide right program, Okay, I took the Q's program. I took the Alpha's program. I took the Sigma's program. I'll give a shout out to Iotas, even though, yeah, right, you know what I mean, no shade to my Iotas. And then even the sororities, Deltas with their Embody program and their Jam. And it's about how do I hire professional student advocates? They're professional, meaning they have degrees. They're about the students and they're about advocacy. And what they do is literally home visits, mentoring, and tutoring. And that's how we've knocked on 500,000 doors. In 16 years, I've knocked on Concentric and my staff. We have knocked on 500, that's 500,000 doors across this country, asking one simple question: how can we be supported? That's it. Not agents, not officers. That stuff don't work. How can we be supported? That's what Concentric does, and been doing for 16.
And what are the services that you provide? Because as you know, and the only way you've been able to grow in the education world, and academics are huge on this, it's all about data and results. Though oftentimes the data that they trumpet don't mirror the results that impact kids that in your world that you're concerned about. So how are you able to maintain the purity of the vision and also speak the language, the data language, in a way where academics say, oh yeah, this works?
Oh yeah, no, great point, because we had particularly a lot of community-based organizations, quite frankly, African-American organizations. You need your data, right? And for the most part, this is going to be a blanket statement, but it's just has been my experience. Europeans only look at data, or Eurocentric views only look at data in a quantitative way. And you know that data is qualitative and quantitative, right? So our approach is ethnographic study. So how do you merge the immersion of the qualitative, the narrative, the story, with the quantitative outcomes that are needed, particularly for funding purposes or whatever the case may be? So what we did is we knew that we had one primary service, and we call it R1, which are home visits. So I know, Kevin, when you were growing up, hell, when I was growing up, when teachers lived in the communities in which they taught, if the student didn't come to school, you lived right next to the kid, and you just knocked on the door. Post integration, that didn't happen, or post deseg, that we moved out, whatever the case would be. The home visit for us is breaking down barriers through authenticity and transparency to have a human connection, not to punish but to understand. And so the home visit then was, what are the barriers? What are the barriers that you're experiencing? Why are you disengaged? Very few students that we have visited don't come just for the sake of not coming. There's some barriers that have to be mitigated. So then what we were doing is we wanted to train people how to do home visits. But we could not get a critical mass in schools to do that on a consistent basis. I'm not talking about now, man, when it's nice outside. I'm talking about when you're up north or in Detroit and it's 0 degrees with 6 inches of snow, or it's raining, or whatever the case may be, or you have competing priorities. We were collecting that data of the barriers, and when we brought it back to the schools, they didn't have the capacity to do much with it. So that's when we took people that looked like you and me, who had the lived experience, and we hired from HBCUs, and I took from fraternities and sororities, and I put people in schools that could have a relationship with students. So then we start doing mentoring. But mentoring wasn't enough, right? And advocacy. So then when we came out of the pandemic, our PSA started tutoring. So now people just want to put, there's a space for online presence, because some people, like my daughter, my oldest daughter, she responded to online tutoring and online instruction, but my son did not, right? My middle-aged son did not. There's a necessity for both approaches. And so our in-person connectivity with people who had shared experience and had the hard skill set is how we went from home visits and mentoring to tutoring. And now, like you said, we're in 20 states. And then that's where we got the funding, the Series A funding. And you know this much better than me. I didn't know what the hell I was even talking about when VC funding came, because black companies don't get VC funding.
No, it's pretty phenomenal. So, David, I have a couple more questions. It just is almost unheard of, but a couple more questions. One relates to the actual book. You decided to put this out there. Talk about how school districts are responding to the book generally, especially those that you haven't worked with, because what you lay out is the vision associated with that sort of touchy-feely aspect of understanding what is the challenge out there and then putting resources in place to address the challenge.
No, thank you so much. So the book was a work in progress for 15 years. Between everything that we experienced, all this collective narrative and stories of what we experienced during home visits, and then one of my co-authors, Michael Gary, he's my chief of staff, but he's also my chapter brother, our frat brother, and he has done 200,000 home visits. He was doing, so you have a theme, right? Like I put younger brothers on because younger brothers are committed to the work that they're doing. He was doing a home visit and he got shot at, right? I'm not sensationalizing, it's what happened. He was doing a home visit and they were breeding pit bulls. I've done home visits. It was the largest crap game I've ever seen in DC, in Southeast, before it switched over and you start walking around, you see Whole Foods. Because DC that I saw isn't what DC looks like now. But that's a whole nother segment, man. They've been, to your point, so it was like, how do we bring that stuff together? And then the missing piece was Ivory. So Dr. Ivory Tolson is professor at Howard. To me, he is our modern day Du Bois. He is our modern day Du Bois. And Ivory was able to take what we experienced and the stories that we were able to collect, and he married it with the academic lens. And so now what we're offering to districts, to your point, is you take these touchy-feely services, which we know are important, and we always did. We just put different names on it. Like when we were coming up, not even when we were coming up, it was 15 years ago, Kevin, it was RTI, Response to Intervention, and then it became MTSS, Whole Child, Social Emotional. It's all this, it just changes, right? People just create new stuff to make more money. To us, we galvanized it under our theory of change, concentricity, and said these are tangible steps that you can do to integrate this into your academics and into your classroom. And districts have been responsive. It's been a challenge for them because they have to see it differently. And academics has always outweighed the soft skills or the soft departments. And this is having them rethink it. So we've had now over in the past 2 weeks 1,000 sales, and that doesn't sound like much, but when you start thinking about the volume that we're pushing out on a daily basis, because it's not just school districts, it's the principals now are buying them for their staff, 30, 40, 50 at a clip.
Yeah, it's powerful. So David, one last question. This is what I really want to know. As an educational entrepreneur, how do you see innovation going forward, shaping the future of urban education?
So that's a great question. This is a great question. Is the more things change and innovate, I feel like many of the things have stayed the same and we're reverting back to it. So if you remember a couple of years ago, Kevin, we were trying to figure out how to integrate technology into the school. And I'm talking about particularly like cell phones. Now this year, there's been a mass movement to ban cell phones. Right? Like there's almost every district now is coming up with something. But just 4 years ago, it was how can we integrate it in? Right? I think historically, education has been the least innovative industry that I've seen. Right? But we have to redefine what innovation is and marry it with the connectedness that is absolutely necessary. So for example, AI is not going anywhere. And I'm on this cusp now, like I'm officially an old head. And in 6 months when I'll be 50, I'll get my old head card. It will say old head on it, right? It'll say old head on it, right? Like I've even given up dyeing my hair. I'm just like, hell with it. It's gonna turn gray again anyway. So we're gonna have to be careful. Like, how do we not lose the connectedness that is necessary for our students, but be very keen and aware of what type of innovation allows us to push our young people forward. The innovation is going to be, and the technology is going to be pivotal, but it's how it's going to be used. And I think it's going to be an ongoing dialogue that we're going to have to continue to have so that we can get there. I'm speaking to my oldest daughter right now, is a sophomore at Prairie View, and so she came in the last 3 years with nothing but AI. And so when they're writing, 7 to 10 page papers, like, we have to come up with the whole infrastructure about what is, how do you use AI and what's acceptable. And I think school districts are struggling with that right now. Yeah, they are. And David, what I would say, as we close this program, I'm so glad you were able to make it. There's an old expression about, revolutionaries. In order to be part of any revolution, and I will apply innovation to that, you have to experience a revolution or an innovation spirit in your own mind. And I do think you've touched on it. The challenge in education has been the adults. Oftentimes, children now communicate through the digital age and with cell phones, and we rail against it and try to limit it. So the adults who are caretakers and have custodial responsibility for educating our young, they need to be focused on how they can experience their own innovative spirit, revolutionary spirit in terms of understanding technology, and then they can connect and relate with children and learn how to do things a little differently. You're absolutely right. The system is not necessarily designed to do that, and I think you've figured out how to at least crack that nut in a way that works for kids, and I appreciate you for it. No, let me say this, man. Let me give you your flowers, because you deserve them. Is that you've been doing this work for so long, man. Not to age you, but I mean, for those in this industry, we know you, we know your heart, we know the sacrifice that you've done. You've paved so much for so many. Quite frankly, if it wasn't for you, much of the work that had been done in DC, and only you know it, wouldn't have been done. I mean, that you were a risk taker before it was popular to be a risk taker. And what you're doing now, even giving me an opportunity to come and share, and that's what I've been trying to do, because how much was done for me. If it wasn't for you, there's been so many people, but it wasn't for you, Dr. Rabowski, Dr. Asante, Kim Statham, for believing. Hell, I will even say this: Kim risked her job to give me a startup grant to start Concentric. No one wants to say it wasn't personal, because black folks weren't getting opportunities through New School Venture Fund out in Cali back then. Now they are. They have a whole diversity stream, but we weren't getting that opportunity. So, shout out, continue to do your thing, brother, and I appreciate you, and however I can be supportive. And thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right, David Heiber, once again, thank you for joining us on What I Want to Know. Good luck.
Thank you, my brother.
Thanks for listening to What I Want to Know. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, so you can explore other episodes and dive into our discussions on the future of education. And write a review of the show. I also encourage you to join the conversation and let me know what you want to know using hashtag WIWTK on social media. That's hashtag WIWTK. For more information on Stride and online education, visit stridelearning.com. I'm your host, Kevin P. Chavous. Thank you for joining What I Want to Know.